indication of any time, including poisoning. The bodies, like I said, had some bruising, and they did have rodent bites. It's not clear when the rodent bites happened, though most people think it probably happened in the time that they were dumped.
Well, yeah, it's not. It was slightly wooded, and you're gonna have rats and raccoons and all those little critters who were going for the soft bits first.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they did kind of go. I was gonna say they went for the faces first. And I will also say that while neither of the girls reportedly had signs of rape, at least Barbara likely had sex around the time of her death.
Yeah, apparently there was no evidence of any forcible rape on either one of them, but Barbara did have sperm in her body. So that could just mean she had sex with her boyfriend a few days before. I mean, it's hard to say.
Yeah, it could have been, Yep.
You were thinking necrophilia there for a second, weren't you?
I was just trying to do the math of like how long do sperm.
I have heard that they can live as long as like 5 days in a woman's body, but that's a kind of an outlier.
But I also don't know how you would know necessarily how old. I mean, she died,
especially at that time.
You know.
Yeah, the dating of it, and if she's been dumped and sitting there for 20-some days. I mean, that it especially in the 50s, it becomes very hard to get very exact of, this was obviously 2 days old before.
Yeah, it would be almost impossible, I think.
Nah, they found some, but God knows when it got there.
Yeah, exactly. In May of 1957, so 5 months after their bodies were found, Loretta got a call from a man who said that he knew who had killed her daughters and that he had helped undress them. The caller also told Loretta something that she found very startling. Quote, "I know something about your little girl that no one else knows but you, not even the police, and it's never been in the papers. The smallest girl's toes were crossed on both her feet." Barbara was the smallest girl, and apparently, yes, her toes were crossed on both her feet.
It was a deformity?
It was a deformity, and everybody agrees that was not something that anybody other than the killer, or, anybody who, knew her personally, but,
or anybody who did gym class with her in high school.
Yeah, but, what a seriously deranged troll. If, that's a troll.
Yeah, it is. But people there are tons of people like that.
And she got multiple callers calling her and taunting her.
Yeah.
For quite a while. It wasn't you hear the stuff of, I recognize his voice, but there was, from what I read in the old newspapers, she had at least 3 distinct weirdos calling her and saying god-awful stuff.
Yeah, but this one did stand out because this person clearly knew something about her daughter that not a lot of people knew. I mean, realistically, I remember in my gym class, I couldn't tell you if any of the girls that I went to gym class with had weird toes. You're not.
It's one of those dealios, and we all know this. We've been to high school or gym class. You could go your entire time and nobody would ever notice. But if one jerk does notice and they point it out to everybody, and everybody's going to be looking at your toes from then on, So
yeah, but it does sound
it's hard to say.
I mean, I think this was widely reported, right? That no one knew this, so that was why. And I guess maybe I believe the best in people, but I believe that if everybody in school knew that she had crossed toes, at least one of the friends would have come forward and said, no. Everybody in our high school knew, everybody knew about that. They wouldn't necessarily just say. I mean, I would if somebody said, and only 3 people knew about this thing, and I was like, no, we all knew about it. I would tell that person just to
So change the scenario, though. It's entirely possible that our troll caller worked for the ME's office, or worked at the funeral home,
or at a friend of a friend of a friend,
or got knew somebody who got drunk and let slip something that worked in one of those places. I mean, there are some very simple, not directly involved ways, and not just the high school theory, that information could have slowly seeped out, and somebody just grabbed it and was such a
I guess.
Weirdo to make that call.
But it's even weirder to me that an ME would be oh yeah, that double murder case that we found, what was weird about that? That girl had crossed toes. That's weird to me too.
People sit around and talk about their work, and they talk about their case, and this is the case. And the thing that nobody ever talked about was, it happens.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not supposed to happen, but people are human, and details slip.
They do that. Yeah, a lot of that stuff gets circulated more widely than you think. I mean, her doctor was probably aware of the condition, and who knows, the night janitor might have rooted around in people's medical files. You know? I mean, God knows.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Especially if they're the kind of person to call a woman who just had 2 of her daughters murdered upon her. They're probably not, worried about.
Yeah, their scruples are pretty.
Yeah, but I do think
it could have been the killer.
I think it could have been, or his accomplice.
Mm-hmm. Or somebody who just knew.
Yeah.
Maybe it wasn't even. Maybe he wasn't even there.
Yeah. But I think that one call is pretty weird.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about why that call is weird in a little bit.
Okay.
When we get to theories.
You need to uncross your toes?
Yeah.
Okay. Gordon, Rachel, Paula, and Emerald. They all make it seem so easy. You watch them climb into that teeny little box and think, how do they do it? How do they make that little place seem so big and magical and at the same time make delicious meals appear? Well, the answers are pretty simple. First, they're not actually in your television. That's an illusion. And second, they have other people helping them out behind the scenes, and now you can too. With my busy life, I don't have time to be running back and forth to the grocery store, and that's why Home Chef is my new best friend. Home Chef offers easy-to-prepare meals that are delivered straight to my door, and there's no headaches and no hassles. And with Home Chef, I get to cook like a 5-star chef whenever I want. Their meals are mouth-watering, and pre-portioned ingredients are so easy to prepare, it only takes me about 30 minutes. Just last night, I made Home Chef's chicken marsala, and it was amazing. This weekly meal delivery system fits my crazy schedule, and that's why I keep coming back. Craft a delicious meal that you're guaranteed to go wild for with Home Chef. Go to homechef.com/sideways now and you get $30 in free meals. Again, that's homechef.com/sideways for that $30 in free meals. Make it look like you're doing it all on your own. We won't tell.
And we're back.
When your toes are straight.
They're straight now.
No more hammer toe.
Let's talk about theories.
Well, there's a lot of theories in this one.
Well, kind of, yeah. And
actually, not really.
One thing that I'm just going to go ahead and say right off the bat, and that's the thing that has bothered me about this case, and probably why I didn't really want to do it for a while, is that there's a lot of theories about, like, who's the murderer and when were they murdered, but never, like, why or what happened to them or anything like that.
Yeah, nobody ever actually came up with a good motive for it.
Yeah, and especially since it sounds like it's likely they were within 2 blocks of their home when they got abducted. Nobody ever talks about, was it, boy, did they know them? Did they willingly go with this person?
You would think it'd be somebody they knew.
You would think so too, but yeah. I'm just going to go ahead and start off by saying that frustrates me more than anything on this case, that there's nobody seems to care about that. They just seem to care about who did it. But we're gonna talk about the first theory, and I'm just gonna toss it in here because you'll see it everywhere. Obviously, it's a bad theory, but it was the prevailing theory until January 22nd.
It kind of was.
And that was that the girls had just run away. You remember there was that one sighting, quote-unquote sighting in Nashville?
In the record store?
No.
Oh.
Nashville.
That was at the
the
work employment agency.
Yeah. So there was a very popular theory at the time that the girls had actually run away to just go either live with Elvis or like him or emulate his lifestyle. So they had reportedly run off to Tennessee to live like Elvis.
Or maybe live with Elvis.
Or
live with
Elvis,
live with him
maybe.
and he got bored with him and murdered him.
Maybe, yeah. Yeah, that's a good theory, Joe.
I like that theory.
It's not a good theory. So I'm not really sure what the people thought the motive was, but apparently that was a big theory. It was such a big theory, in fact, that Graceland at the time released a statement on the 19th of January, unfortunate timing, that says, if you are good Presley fans, you'll go home and ease your mother's worries.
I had heard even that, and of course this is, again, time goes by and things get twisted up. I heard Elvis himself went on the radio and actually pled with the girls to go home.
I've not seen that.
Yeah,
I suspect that's not true.
Yeah,
but maybe.
Could very well be.
Yeah, it's hard to say about that. I don't know. I like Joe's idea, though, that the king did it.
I do.
Although those girls did not look like small pills, so I don't know why he would have done that.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next theory is murder.
Yeah, well, maybe they ran away, but obviously something foiled their plans and murdered them instead.
Yeah, something did.
Something or someone.
Someone.
Yeah.
We're going to go, in my estimation, least likely to most likely. It's how I have arranged these.
Yeah. And again, we don't know if they were kidnapped to be raped or just somebody just wanted to kill people for the hell of it. Or
yeah. So
don't really know.
we'll address that a little bit as we go through this.
We're going to start with the least likely, huh?
I think least likely, yeah.
Wait a
Walter Krantz.
You don't think Elvis is the least likely?
We just did him, didn't we?
Oh, okay, good point.
See?
Okay.
Haha. Krantz was a 53-year-old man who called the police on January 15th to report that he had a dream that the bodies of the girls were in the Santa Fe Park, which was about 1.5 miles from where they were actually found. And also they were discovered like a week later. So, he called them a week before and said, the girls are here, and they found them 1.5 miles away a week later. So the police thought, this is suspicious. But Krantz told the police that he should listen to them because psychic powers ran in his family.
Oh, there you go.
The police apparently, really seriously did interrogate him a number of times.
Well, hell yeah.
And if he was really psychic, he should have seen that coming.
He should have seen it coming.
Well, I
guys.
tell you, I'm not psychic, and I would have seen it coming.
Yeah.
I was even if I had that dream, I would have kept my mouth shut.
Yeah, I think he was just trying to be helpful.
Maybe, but actually, it's a known fact though that actually killers do sometimes, actually quite often, try to insert themselves in the investigation.
We've
talked about that
many times.
Yeah. It's almost like Joe is trying to insert himself in the narrative of killers inserting themselves into stories.
Exactly. I'm always trying to just horn in on your narrative here.
I know.
I've actually seen him in the bookstore writing his name into the text on stories.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm actually trying to insert my body right into the bookshelves.
It does, yeah.
He's not allowed in pals anymore.
And by the way, just so you don't get the wrong idea, we're talking like head first.
So, the police interrogated him and ultimately decided, well, no, he's just comes from a family of psychics. He just knew.
He just knew within 1.5 miles.
So, he just happened to guess location and call them, and he wasn't involved at all. So, I agree with them, actually.
Well,
Book shut.
Man, actually, he might have been right. Maybe the bodies were dumped there, and maybe the groundskeepers there didn't want to deal with it, and they moved bodies.
I don't
Probably
think so.
not.
Next is Silas Jane. Woo!
Yeah, remember him?
Good old Cy.
Remember Silas?
We last talked about Silas in the context of the Indiana Dudes murders, or disappearances.
Literally 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Talked about Silas Jane. He's not really a good suspect, unfortunately, for this one. And I'm honestly not even really sure how he's connected to the case other than being kind of a hugely disgusting human pile of trash.
It was very subtle.
Thank you, yeah. Sorry, Silas, if you're listening, I guess. I don't know what you want from me, Steve. It's kind of through this really tenuous connection with Kenneth Hansen, who the connection to Silas Jane and Kenneth Hansen is not tenuous, but the connection with Hansen in this case is tenuous in that Hansen isn't even named as a suspect. It's just Silas Jane. But Hansen was a pedophile, and they were both connected to the Peterson-Schluscher case.
We went through this pronunciation conundrum before.
I still can't do it.
And I don't think even Silas Jane actually had much to do with those murders.
Well, the murders supposedly took place at his stable.
At his stables, but but he wasn't there when it happened.
Right, and I think that what people are saying is that it could be a similar situation, because I remember something about approaching the girls to see horses is how people equate this, except that typically for a guy like Hansen, there's predilection towards young boys or young girls. So it's weird that he would be literally playing both sides of the fence.
Yes, that's the weird part about him.
Yeah, I don't think it was him. Although it's a funny story about it, though. It's like somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, I murdered 3 young boys on your property," and Silas Jane, instead of saying "Okay" and ratting him up to the police, he just says, "Okay, get rid of the bodies." Then he burned his stable down. You have to cover any evidence.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a true friend.
Yeah,
doesn't rat you out.
Yeah, well,
or a good
Silas
business associate.
I was going to say Silas Jane had a lot to hide in his life, so burning down his stable was kind of like, oh great, I'll get rid of all that other evidence too.
I guess, and I got some insurance money, so
yeah.
no problem.
Perfect.
And the other reason I don't like Kenneth Hansen as a suspect is his MO was to approach usually young men
Young boys.
Or boys.
Yeah,
Not
like
even
we're
young
saying.
men.
And
yeah.
we're talking like, and talking about like in the context of,
Preteen.
hey, do you want to go see some beautiful thoroughbred racehorses? Or, hey, would you like some employment, whatever? Those are usually his things.
Yeah.
So approaching the girls at 11 o'clock on a winter night and saying,
Oh,
hey,
no.
you want a job? I mean, what the hell? That's
No.
not the story that would work.
I agree. It's not a good theory. So let's move on.
Okay, next.
To Benny Bedwell. Yes.
Oh,
that
that's a great
name-
one.
It sounds familiar, right? We were talking about sightings.
Yeah, he'd been mentioned
Benny
before.
Bedwell, you see?
Yeah.
Yeah, Benny
he was the
Bedwell.
dishwasher that was
Yeah.
reportedly seen with the girls a few days after their disappearance. You know, when Patricia was just so drunk she couldn't walk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good party.
Yeah. Benny's real name was Edward Lee Bedwell. He was just called Benny. And he was 21 years old at the time of the disappearance. He was reportedly illiterate or even maybe borderline mentally retarded. And he was a drifter from Tennessee who apparently slightly resembled Elvis. I don't see the resemblance, but I do see he was attractive. He was an attractive young man, but I don't think he looked like the king. He looked like the king in the way that like most dudes from that age look kind of like the king.
The
The hair.
hairstyles.
Yeah, they all wore their
clothes.
hair and their clothes and kind of had the affected face, you know, and they dyed. They all had black hair, you know.
By the way, is it just me or does Elvis half the time look like he had just had Botox? You ever notice that his face is always rather slack in the early years? Oh.
Kind of immobile, yeah.
Yeah, I always
Yeah.
figured he must have had a lot of Botox.
I was gonna say it's almost like he did a lot of drugs or something.
That could have been
Something.
it. You know, I
Yeah.
seen old Willie Nelson. He always looked like a robot to me. I saw him on some TV show singing, and I thought, he's not real. He's not. They put a mannequin there. The only part of it that's moving at all is just his lips. The rest
Yeah.
of it's just like.
Well, no, there's the hand that's got the joint moving
Yeah.
back and forth, and that is definitely not
So,
animated.
so Benny.
Oh yeah, back to the mystery.
Yeah.
Sorry.
The theory goes that the sisters were with Benny and another man on the 7th, and then
January?
after 7 days of drinking and feeding the girls hot dogs. That's a direct quote of what the police alleged Benny did. And then they, quote, beat the girls to death, unquote, after the girls refused further sexual advances and then dumped their bodies on the 7th.
So they waited 7 days to beat them to death?
They were drinking and having a good time partying with the girls for 7 days. And then after the girls were like, oh, wait, we don't want to do this anymore, they got mad and beat them to death and then dumped their bodies. There are a number of problems with this theory. First off, the police did manage to get a signed confession from Benny that said, yes, this is exactly what happened. I fed them hot dogs and everything. But he was, as previously mentioned, illiterate and claims he was coerced, which I think is highly likely. He
It was
was
very
coerced.
standard at the time.
Oh, yeah. Second, there was like no evidence of the girls being beaten to death. Their autopsies provided no evidence that they'd had hot dogs or even alcohol. And third, Benny had actually been clocked in to work and like seen at work, not dishwashing, but another job that he was working when the girls were likely abducted. Gross, you remember Harry Gross?
Yeah, the medical examiner.
Yeah. Well, he wasn't a medical examiner. He was an investigator for the medical examiner. He was sure it was Benny. And he insisted that there had been evidence of extreme sexual violence and abuse, as well as intoxicants, so drugs and alcohol both, in both Barbara and Patricia's systems, and that evidence was being withheld for their mother's well-being or benefit or something like that.
Or it could have been withheld just because the police like to withhold certain bits of evidence too, just from the public.
Yeah, but I don't think to the detriment of the narrative of, if they have a suspect in custody
and his story matches,
they're not going to
didn't.
say no, that didn't happen. Yeah.
We're not saying this because we're protecting the family's honor.
Yeah, they're not going to do that.
They're
That's
going to use
silly.
that to put him in irons.
Yeah, it was actually Gloss. They said, okay, you're lying. To retract your story. You're dragging this innocent man's name through the mud. And Gloss said, no, I'm not going to. And so they fired him.
Yeah.
And I agree. I don't think Benny did it. I think he was an easy
Target?
scapegoat. I think he was just a guy who happened to be the unfortunate landing block of some people.
Well, I'm sure police have cleaned up their act a lot since those days, at least hopefully so. But that kind of thing of like, just badgering somebody till he finally breaks down and agrees to sign something. And then, All right, so we're going to write out a statement of what you said here. This is not a confession; it's just a statement. So we're going to need you to sign it. And of course, him being illiterate, like you say.
Well, they could have
written out
literally.
everything.
They could have said, "Yeah, this is just a receipt for your stuff."
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I mean, like if he was so illiterate that he literally didn't. You know, it was just like scribbles on a page, and I don't know how illiterate he was. You know, there's definitely a spectrum of illiteracy.